What was supposed to save me, my life vest, actually is what drowned me. I popped right out of my body into this darkness. 3 fragments broke away and came toward me. They emanated this welcoming home. Just welcome home. I started to relive my life. I call them my soul family, these 12 light beings, and they were experiencing it with me. I know my body is broken in that ocean. I have no desire to go back to it. The light spoke one more time. It said, "You must return. You have a purpose."
The episode you're about to watch has been republished. My podcast channel reaches a lot more people now, and there's certain episodes that have slipped under the radar, and I wanted to bring them up for your attention because I truly feel they are worth listening to. So please be sure to let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And of course, let's continue to connect. Let me know where you are in the world and where you're listening and tuning in from. I love reading it. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can do this? And the other thing I want to say as well is find out where we are if you want to put your spiritual boots on and come and join us at one of our 5-day retreats or 1-day events around the world. Links are below as well if you want to find out more what we're up to. Much love from me. Enjoy. Beautiful. David, we're recording. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Guy, thanks for inviting me. This is a privilege. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I stumbled across you somehow on YouTube at some stage. And I have a little folder and I just kind of start collecting names. And then in my own time, when my family life allows me, I go start listening to these different conversations and podcasts. And like we were speaking off air just now about how important these conversations are, I think, and for people to listen to and start to have a deeper understanding, I guess, of what reality is.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And people that listen to these profound experiences that people have, it actually helps them. It gives them more tools on how to live a better life,
Totally. I always say actually podcasting is quite selfish in some respects because I get to talk to awesome people like yourself every week. And I'm always learning. And I really want to bring that beginner's mind into every conversation, every person I meet, and hear different languages, different perspectives, deeper thinking. It's quite amazing. It really is,
Yeah, and to me, it seems like because it's coming more prevalent, you're hearing more and more about it. It's creating its own global movement, which I think is amazing. I speak to people from all around the world, and we're all looking for the same thing. We're looking for our spiritual connection. We're looking for, a more empowered type of life. So, these podcasts are vital.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you for coming on, and I'm intrigued for you to share your journey, your story, and your lessons from it, I guess. And I'm intrigued as well. Did you have a spiritual connection before your near-death experience?
Not really, Guy. I was kind of brought. I was when I was young. I was my mom was a single mom. It wasn't a popular time to be a single mom, and so she used to put me in different families, and she'd find out one family was maybe neglecting me, or another one may have been abusing me, and so I was thrown from one family to the next, to the next, to the next, and I got to see all these different families had different, religious views and followed different paths, but I didn't see where they were really benefiting from it. So I never adopted a religion. I never adopted a spiritual path. But I did have an encounter when I was younger when my mother took me back and I started living with her, and she moved to Arizona, and there were some Native American kids there, and I used to hang out with them. And their grandmothers saw the dysfunction that was in my life. And so they taught me some Native American spirituality that I really believe saved my life, because it really calmed me down, because I was quite a brash young man early on.
What about it do you think had such an impact on you at that time?
Well, actually, there was a spiritual component that I fell into. They taught me how to go into my sacred space. And I went and I tried and tried and tried. I had this little quiet place that I used to go to. It was on top of this little plateau, and I could overlook this valley, and I would try to go into this sacred space that they were talking about. And then one day it happened, and I went. It was almost like a shamanic journey in a lot of ways, where I went into the earth, but then I was flying above. And then a guide came to me, and it was Father Mountain came and spoke to me, and he kind of grounded me, gave me this very grounded approach. And I swear that really calmed me down, because I was quite a radical kid at that point.
I can imagine. How old was you at that stage to have an experience like that?
I was 14. That was when I was 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. It's funny, isn't it? You only need one experience. You know, I often think about the fact that we can have one traumatic experience that can change the trajectory of our life, but also we can have one awakening spiritual experience that can truly change the trajectory of our life too.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, though, I mean, I had that experience. It calmed me down. It, it gave me some sense of direction. But then, we have to get on with life. We have to make a living. We have to, our culture teaches us to strive and to compete and all of that. And so I kind of forgot about it. I kind of forgot about it, and I got on with my life, and I became an engineer. I became actually the chief engineer of a research vessel. We did underwater exploration. So, and that's a very analytical type of job, so I was using most of my,
brain power, using the thinking mind.
The logic. The thinking mind.
What attracted you to it? Was it attraction to engineering, or was there attraction to the ocean?
A little of both, because when I was a teen, my mother moved us around a lot, but I took up scuba diving, and so I had this love for scuba diving. So I went into the Navy as an engineer, thinking that I would go, because you couldn't go into diving, in the time that I went in the service, you couldn't go into diving until you had a career path. And so I went into engineering and thought that then I would go into diving. But then after I spent my time in service, I realized I could go to dive school outside of service and be diving a lot faster. And so I went to a private dive school, and they hired me right out of school to be chief engineer of their research vessel. So it's that guidance, that little inner guidance that you don't really understand, but you just feel this nudge to go in this direction, or you feel a nudge to go in that direction. And so that's kind of what happened. And it always feels, if you're not paying attention to that quiet voice, it just feels like synchronicity, or it just feels like you were in the right place at the right time. But yeah, so guidance kind of led me to become the engineer of this research vessel. And it was my dream job. Absolutely loved it.
Oh, amazing. So how long had you been doing that to when your near-death experience happened?
Well, my near-death experience happened in 1983. And so I was probably the chief engineer of that vessel because it happened while I was the chief engineer. And I've probably been the chief engineer for a good, 7 years or so. Yeah.
So talk us through what happened on that particular day,
well, it was, 1983, and we were evaluating a new remote operated SUV, remote operated vehicle. And a storm was coming in, and we'd seen that there was a storm coming in, and we thought that maybe we could beat it into the harbor, because the design engineer for the sub needed to get to LAX in California. And this is on the West Coast. And we didn't quite beat the storm. And so we were 2 miles off the coast, and the harbor master wouldn't let the ship in. But we needed to get this guy into the harbor. So we lowered a small boat, a rubber Zodiac, and we used that Zodiac to retrieve our submarines and stuff. So it was very durable. We've used it in heavy seas. So we weren't really all that concerned. But the captain because we were on a trip where we were evaluating a submarine, we didn't have our full crew on board, so we just had the engineers and the and the sub crew and that sort of stuff on board. We didn't have the full complement on board the ship. So the captain thought that it would be best, because the mate that we had wasn't too familiar with the harbor. So the captain thought that I should go along. And as chief engineer, normally I don't leave the ship, at least not for something like this. But this night, the captain thought it would be a good idea. And we went down the bosun's locker, put on some life vests, because there were 25 to 30 foot seas. And so, yeah, it was a rough night. And so we jumped in the Zodiac. We took our bearing on the harbor buoy, but 2 miles out. So we had to go up a roller, get up on the top of a swell, kind of get our bearing, go down the trough and get up on top of the next swell, do the same thing. And it wasn't long we lost track of where the harbor buoy was. But we figured, a Zodiac, we can land that on the beach, so it's not a big deal. We'll get this guy in there somehow, some way, and so he can make his flight. Well, we didn't realize the storm had blown us a mile south of the harbor already. And we hit this breaker zone about a mile out. And we drove right off a 25-footer. I mean, we actually flew off of this because the Zodiac could really move, and we flew off the top of this breaker. And I yelled at the mate to turn us around, because I was in the bow trying to navigate. And just as he got us turned about and we we're about to head back out to sea, another one came, and it was right over our head, and it broke right on top of us, and it folded the Zodiac in half. I was in the bow. It catapulted me into the ocean. But I'm a commercial diver. I'm trained, I'm a trained commercial diver. So I'm used to being in the water. I've logged 1,000 hours. I wasn't really all that freaked out, other than, well, here we are. And so I hung on to, and at the time we had one of those old World War II life vests, the old Mae West that looked like giant orange pillows,
Yeah.
And so I'm hanging on to Mae West, waiting for her to bring me up to the surface, and I'm being tumbled and tossed like a rag doll. And I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And Guy, you can only hold your breath so long, and eventually I drown. And I found myself in this absolute darkness. And I was really curious because, I just came from this raging sea. And you live near the ocean. You know how loud that sea can be, right? Well, it was quiet. It was peaceful. It was calm. And I'm in this absolute darkness. And I'm like, what is going on? Because as a commercial diver, we're trained about oxygen deprivation and all that stuff. And this is way beyond anything that I'd experienced in training. And so, but I was very comfortable. On the west coast of the U.S., the water currents come down from the north, and this was in March, so water was very cold, but I was no longer cold. I was just very comfortable in this absolute darkness. And I felt like, there's something about this, because the black, they call it the void, but it feels like everything is contained within it. It's an incredible experience to be in this darkness, but not feel alone, not feel, and many people are frightened by this darkness. Many people that experience this can be frightened, but I just died this violent death. And so I was just very curious.
Do you remember your last breath? Sorry.
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was not a pleasant part. And I usually don't talk about that because but it happens very, very quick. There's a burning, and then, when you breathe in the salt water, there's a burning, but then boom, I popped right out of my body into this darkness.
Into the void.
Yeah. Wow. Into the void. But then I saw this pinprick of light. I mean, just this tiny little light. And I started looking at it, and as I looked at it, it felt like it was coming toward me, or I was going toward it. And as I got closer, I saw that it was millions upon millions of fragments of light. and they were all moving kind of in unison, like they had one mind. And it was just absolutely beautiful. And it was infinite. As I kept getting closer and closer and closer, it became more defined. And as I got closer, I started feeling these waves of love. It was like a warm embrace, and like nothing I'd ever felt before in my life, because I had a pretty dysfunctional childhood. So, a feeling of being embraced in total love was something I had no concept of. And eventually, these fragments, 3 fragments, broke away and came toward me. And as they did, they emanated this welcoming home, just welcome home. And I still get, it still kind of gets me, because they felt like family. They felt more like family than anything I have here on this earth. And eventually there were a dozen of them, and they were all welcoming me. And they kind of communicated that we were going to go deep into the light. And as we went into the light, we went to this area. To me, it felt like a giant bubble inside a sphere. We went inside, and I started to relive my life. And they were experiencing my life just as I was. It was like my consciousness had broken up into multiple fragments of consciousness, and I was experiencing everything in my life through my perspective, but everyone I'd ever interacted through their perspective. I got to experience how they felt about our interaction. I got to feel, what they, how maybe it would affect them. It was incredibly humbling is a fact, because like I've said, it's, I was a brash young man, very brash young man. And I stepped on a few toes in order to get to the position of being the chief engineer of this ship. And they were my soul family. I call them my soul family, these 12 light beings. And they were experiencing it with me. And I was, tell you the truth, Guy, I was a little ashamed that they were experiencing this, but they just loved me. They didn't judge me. They just loved me and supported me through this, this life review. But eventually I reached a point where I had gone past my drowning, and I had gone into, I didn't know it at the time, but I was previewing my future. And it's kind of interesting when I crossed that threshold, everything in the life review was absolutely crystal clear. But when I got to that threshold of future, it was like I was looking down this corridor, and everything in the center of the corridor was very much in focus, but there was also this periphery that was kind of out of focus. And I got the impression that this was, my future potentials, my future, where I could go down this central corridor and I would hit these marks. But if I veered to the right, I could, possibly experience some additional things, but I would always be nudged back to the center. So I eventually reached a point where the light, this infinite fragments of light all spoke in unison. And I perceived this to be God. And it said, "This is not your time. You must return." And I said, "No way. I am not going back. I found a family that I feel that loves me. I feel love like I've never felt before. I know my body is broken in that ocean, and I have no desire to go back to it." And the light spoke one more time. It said, "You must return. You have a purpose." And that word purpose just kind of resonated in my being. And when we're when we're out of our body, and when we're in, in this other state of being, we have more available to us as far as consciousness. It was like we're connected to all the souls that ever were and all the souls that ever will be. And so within this expanded consciousness, I understood that word purpose. I understood it, and it was so simple and so efficient. And so I immediately came to acceptance. And the minute I came to acceptance, I found myself outside of my body. I'm still in my light body, and my original 3 soul family members that greeted me are with me, and we're observing my body still in the breaker zone being tumbled and tossed. I'd gotten caught in that breaker zone. And I saw the bow line of the zodiac come. My body came close to the bow line of the zodiac where it wrapped itself around my arm, and another wave came through, and there must have been some air left in one of the pontoons of the zodiac, and it popped up. And when it did that, it cinched that line around my arm, and it pulled my body up to the surface, and where I got tangled. And I'm observing this from outside my body. I'm watching this happen, and I'm just in awe. And when it did that, it dislocated my shoulder, but I didn't feel anything. Because I was outside my body just observing this. And my body got caught up in all the lines, and some other waves came, and they pounded me up against this wreckage. And when it did, it pushed a little bit of that salt water out of my lungs. And that's when my soul family gave me a gentle push, and I found myself vibrating right back into my body.
Wow. You've triggered about 20 questions in that.
I'll bet. And
That's
it was
remarkable.
A rough night, but we still had, and we had to swim another mile. But the heroes of my story are the guys that I was with in that Zodiac. They had stayed on station. They had stayed there looking for me, because that's what we do. We rally in a situation like that, and we all help each other in, right? Well, they had stayed there, and one of them had found a flashlight. Somehow had hung on to a flashlight, because they were coming in with their gear. They had all their gear, and one of them was using a flashlight as kind of like a navigational thing on the boat, and so he hung on to that thing in these raging waves. I don't know how he ever managed it, but so they were looking for me. And I couldn't talk after you breathe in all that salt water. It's you just squeak and squawk a little bit. But they found me. And then we all swam that final mile in together.
Wow. Well, even getting in, I still can't. I'm kind of picturing, because I was in the surf club in Coogee here in.
You have some pretty tremendous waves there. Yeah.
I know, but look, I'm a Welshman that came to Australia that couldn't swim, let alone knew what a rip was. And I went through did my bronze medallion training just to get up to speed a bit. And, and just thinking of a 10-foot swell that would come in would be like, oh my God. But
you understand the force, and you understand how it can just push you down. Yeah. It just. And a mile offshore, this breaker zone, it was, like there was a bar out there, and which created an upswell that, pushed us down.
I wish people would even just go online and look at what a 30-foot swell looks like, and imagine being under one of those things. My God. I got to ask you initially, the light beings that appeared, who, and you say the soul family, who is it? What did they look like? Who were they?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. They were, like I said, I call them fragments of light. They were light, and you could see their eyes, and in their eyes, I could recognize them as beings that I had spent lifetimes with. And so I recognized that immediately. And it was very emotional for me, to see them again. And it wasn't like, there was only one of the people in this group were people that I had lived in this life with. And that was my guardian, one of my guardians. And he was still alive. This is an interesting thing. He was still alive at the time of the near-death experience, but when we come back, I have this theory about this, that when we come into this life, we only bring a small portion of our light with us. The greater part of our light, our being, our essence, resides in that oneness. And so the greater portion of but when we die, we reintegrate with that and connect with our totality of who we really are, our essence, our light essence.
Do you think then, because I ponder on this a lot, but so the greater totality of us is witnessing and knows what's going on, but we're taking the lessons here because we have that spiritual amnesia. We don't remember the connection at first,
right?
To allow us to learn the lessons.
Yeah, because we live in this illusion of separateness, where we're all separate individuals forging our life. When in fact we're all really interconnected, and we have this connection to our light, our being, our greater being, in the oneness. At least that's the way I experienced it. And then our interconnectedness with everyone else is, that's, to me, that's God. That's the greater oneness and the interconnectedness of all life, not just human beings, but all life.
Why do you think it? Do you ponder on, like, was it just a freak accident? Was it part of your soul's growth journey?
Yeah, boy.
To have that insight is huge, right? Like we were talking off air, because over time I was slowly talking about it more, having different out of body and mystical experiences. It really changes your perspective on who we are with other humans and what about life. Like, it's an incredible gift, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, this well, there were a lot of little things that happened. Like when I saw that bow line, it was the bitter end of the bow line was tapping my lifeless chest when I was observing my body before I was, miraculously resuscitated. And so the bitter end was tapping my lifeless chest. But what was supposed to save me, my life vest, actually is what drowned me. And because it was an Old May West, but I didn't realize the fiber lining was dry rotted, and it became super saturated with salt water. So it never had a chance to bring me up to the surface. So I played with my mind, something terrible after I got back. What was supposed to save me killed me, but I was saved by the bitter end. And and it just, so why? And why? And I argued with God and that I wanted to stay there. And, no one does that. So I felt very, very, it scared me. It honestly, it scared the heck out of me. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I couldn't talk about it with my mates because we had incredibly dangerous work that we did. As in the 80s, doing underwater exploration was incredibly dangerous work. And so we put each other's lives in each other's hands every day. So talk about death was kind of taboo. So I didn't feel like I could share that. And I tried to share it with my wife at the time. That was my first wife. And that didn't go too well. And so I didn't feel like I could share this with anybody. And so I had to deal with this myself. And it really, I only took what I could deal with at the time. And that was, I had this profound life review and I got to really see who I was. And so I could accept this is who I am. I know I've got a lot of work to do, but this is who I am. And then tolerance for others. Before this experience, I really didn't have tolerance for anybody. I just had my own self-involved view of the world, and that was it. So suddenly I could see that we're going to cross each other's paths, and we may, I may not agree with choices that you make in life, but they're your choices. It's your life. And I can now be tolerant of that, because of what I saw in the life review and that interactions that I had with people. And then the other thing was an inner truth. Before I was an engineer, I saw things as pretty much black and white, And then suddenly I realized that within us, we have not only our mental capability, but we also have our heart and our being and our essence. And a lot of times things will cross our path that just light up in our life, and that's a personal truth. And so I started paying more attention to that. So those three things, acceptance, tolerance, and truth, kind of became my mantra. But I didn't share it with anybody for over 11 years until I had a second experience that told me, a second one. Yeah. But the second one, I really didn't die. I just re-experienced my life. I've talked to some NDE researchers, and they've told me that, it's not uncommon for if someone represses their experience, because I really did. I only took that, the talking with God, my soul family, the love, all of that. I tried to forget. I tried to get past.
So no one knew really?
No, well, I tried to share it with my first wife, but other than that nobody knew.
Wow. Because today you can go on the YouTube, you can search, you can, there's these conversations, right? If you have something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why these conversations online are so important, because people that are having experience today now have resources that I didn't have back in the early 80s, So I can see how vital this is, and how important these are. But so so that's what I took for 11 years. And then I had a second experience where I saw, in the life review, the second time I saw I'd lived 11 years, and just that little bit that I had taken, acceptance, tolerance, and truth, and how it had really changed me, and how I didn't realize how much it had changed me. But it kind of pointed out that I really need to accept the entire experience. I need to just live with it, make it who I am, and start living by what I'd learned in this experience. And then I really feel that my integration of this experience, really, that's when it started, was 11 years later in 94.
Wow. Because you mentioned as well that you had stage 4 lung and bone cancer.
That was in 2000. Yeah.
Oh, so that was later. Okay.
Much later. Yes. I had stage 4 lung and bone cancer, and it was lung cancer that metastasized into my spine, ate away 2.5 bones of my thoracic. My spine actually collapsed because the
ate away 2.5
bones of my spine. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so, here we go again, close to death. But this time I had actually seen this in that part of the life review where I was looking at my future. I had seen I was going to deal with cancer, but I also saw I was going to live beyond it. So I didn't realize it was going to happen. And that's the thing. There's no time on the other side. So it's hard to determine, because we live in this linear life where we're constantly putting, things in a timeline. But on the other side, everything is kind of like at once. And so there is no time. So I had no idea when cancer was going to happen, but I was pretty sure I was going to have it. But I also thought I was going to live beyond it, but I didn't think it was going to be that severe either, So this was kind of a third experience, actually, in its own way. And I learned that, this all comes back around to the purpose that I was told about, because going through stage 4 lung and bone cancer and a collapsed spine with a really poor prognosis. The doctors only gave me 8 weeks to survive, because when they started testing, they found I had lesions in my hip, my brain, my kidneys. It was traveling through my body very rapidly, and they didn't expect me to survive. And this was back in 2000. And I used my inner guidance, because after the first and second experience, I actually started communicating with spirit. And I call it spirit, but it's, I believe it's my soul family that communicates with me through my light connection. And because each one of them has a different flavor, a different strength, a different voice. And And so through all these years, since 83 all the way up to, 2000, when I was diagnosed with the cancer, I had developed my spirit communication. And so I was using that guidance to overcome the cancer, because I knew I was going to overcome it. Everybody else thought I was in denial, but but I believed I was going to, I had seen in my life review I was going to overcome it. So I was pretty certain. But so I immediately accepted the prognosis and started using my guidance on, on how to overcome it. So I did a combination of traditional and holistic approaches in order to overcome, the cancer. And within 6 months, my guidance was telling me that it was, that I was doing well. And so I asked for another scan, and they did finally got around to a PET scan. And when they did, it showed that my body was cancer-free.
Wow. How do you cope when you've got external pressures of people influencing you, saying, are you crazy? You need to do this. You need to do that. And you're standing strong in your faith.
Yeah. It used to bother me. It used to really bother me. I used to be afraid. That's why 11 years I was in ice. I didn't tell anybody because I was afraid they'd think I was nuts, right? But then I started to realize, and I met some other experiencers who validated that these experiences are real. And that helped me. That was a leg up for me. And then when I started talking about it, because I'd had 11 years to kind of deal with my own experience, I was very self-assured in my experience. I didn't compare it to anybody else's. And so I just, when I did start talking about it and start being more public, because Spirit was encouraging me to speak more about it. I didn't really want to, but, Spirit made me write a book and all that kind of stuff. And it changed, and that shifted my life as well. It took another turn with that. And so I guess when I got to the point that I was self-assured within my experience, I no longer really, and this, I don't mean to sound insensitive, but I don't really care if people think I'm crazy or not, because I'm secure in my experience. I know that it was real. In fact, it felt more real than this life, And so I really, really am living with what I'd learned in these experiences. These experiences have all built one on another to who I am right now. So I'm very secure in who I am. Now, I have people that come up and they're, they're a little skeptical. And I tell people, skepticism is a healthy thing, especially in today's world when there's, all this, false reality stuff going on. So I think skepticism is a healthy thing to be, It's cynicism that we don't want to adopt, because cynicism means that you have a hard, way of looking at things and you don't allow other viewpoints, but whereas skepticism is, we're looking for the truth. We're looking for truth. If you're a skeptic, you're actually looking for truth. If you're a cynic, then you're hard and fast in your belief and you don't want to know anything else,
Yeah. What do you think is then our soul's purpose?
Yeah, I get that question all the time.
A lot, I bet.
I really believe that that purpose is multifaceted. I believe that we have our own purpose, our own paths, but also we have shared paths because of this interconnectedness. Like one example of a shared path is for all of humanity to come in touch with their spiritual source. Okay, that could be a shared purpose for all of us. But then we all have personal and even moment to moment type of things. Another example, like say you're researching something on the web and you come across this information that just really blows you away, something you hadn't ever read before or you haven't watched before. And then, son of a gun, if somebody doesn't come into your life or cross your path that was looking for that exact information, That's a little small purpose that we achieve within our lives, where we can share and we can be a part of someone else's life and help them along on their path. So I believe that purpose is, like I said, multifaceted. There are personal purpose, there are shared purposes, and then there's these spontaneous purposes where the universe may put us in a certain set of circumstances so that we can fulfill, something.
Yeah, I ponder on that too, because it's as if we get hung up on what is my life's purpose, and it's just this very straight linear arrow that I can jump on and off I go.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to legacy anymore.
Yeah.
That I want to leave some legacy behind. I really don't subscribe to that anymore because, in fact, it's kind of funny because I started doing these podcasts quite a while ago, and some people you could connect with, like Guy, you and I, we kind of had this connection, right? But some people are very rote in the way that they because they do thousands of these, and they just boom, 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 they have the same questions. And I was really not connecting with this one. And I tried to tell her that, I don't plan my future, because if I'm being the best person I possibly can be in this moment, then I'm building the brightest and most empowering future I can possibly build. So I don't really need to plan my future. I don't need to build a legacy. And so then she asked me, well, where do you see yourself in 10 years? It's like, apparently you're not listening, because I don't know where I'll be in 10 years. And that's the beauty of it. I allow it to unfold. I just want life to unfold, and I will flow with it, and I will go with wherever it leads me.
Yeah, beautiful. It's almost like giving ourselves permission to give up that control, because within that control, we find a sense of safety, even though that is an illusion as well, I believe.
It was a hard lesson for me, though. I can honestly say I'm at this point now, but it was a long road to get here, because I was an engineer. I used to plan everything in my life, and I used to, that was the way I lived my life. And to give that up it was really hard. It wasn't an easy thing to do. My current wife, though, really helped me there, because when I had the cancer, suddenly I was out of work, and I have I have to deal with hospitals and doctors and all this kind of stuff. And it was very daunting, and I was very concerned. And she helped me out with, well, you got to let go of the money and just allow it to come, and she taught me this cute little phrase that I use to this day. Whenever I'm paying a bill, if it's credit card, if it's groceries or something like that, while I'm paying it, I say, God is my supply. And even if I write a check, and nobody writes checks anymore, but when I used to write a check, I used to put 4 little X's after my name. That was, God is my supply.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely. So when did you write your book and started to really come out?
2011, the book was published by Findhorn Press, and it I went on a 2-month book tour. So it was actually published. It wasn't self-published, and went on this whirlwind tour that really, really started changing. It really changed the way you live your life, because now you're not hiding anymore. You've told your story in detail, and how you integrated it, how it changed your life and everything. Because I put everything in my book. It's not just the near-death experience. It's who I was before, the experience itself, and then how I learned to live with it and how I learned to integrate with it. Because, when you have an experience like this, a profound experience, it rocks your world, and you have to, God, how do I deal with this? How do I live with this? I said, it threw me into this new paradigm shift where my worldview doesn't align anymore, and I have to reestablish myself. And how am I going to move forward? And how am I going to live my life? Those are all questions that people that have had profound experiences have to deal with. And
yeah. Well, what's your relationship with then death and life now after having something like that? Because, it's something I kind of contemplate on and learning, and I look around because I love life. Like, I have a beautiful family, and I'm very passionate about what I do, and, and it's like, wow, it's a fascinating topic.
It is. And I'm like you. I want to squeeze all the juice out of life. I want to live my life, I have these disabilities. I have a rebuilt spine. I can't feel my hands or feet. I have only one lung, and, so I don't have a lot of stamina. I have a lot of disabilities, but I do not allow that. I don't think of myself as disabled. I'm not going to allow that to dictate who I am or how I live my life. I'm going to live my life. I know I have limitations, and so I try to live within those limitations, but I push the envelope, because I'm a guy, but I'm going to live my life. And like I said, I'm going to squeeze all the juice I can out of it, because that's why we're here, is to get as much experience in as we can. Now, as far as death, when my time comes, I'll be happy to go. I'll be happy to go. But I would never do anything to shorten this life, because I understand the preciousness of living a life, what living a life is all about. But when my time comes, I no longer fear it. I'm willing, when my time comes, I will gladly cross that threshold. I'm not going to fight it. That's for sure. Yeah.
Wow. What do you, when you look upon the world right now and see the vastness of changes and things that are happening, there's still a huge amount of fear out there, and all sorts of, conversations going on online and everything. Where are your views at this moment after having your experiences? Do you feel like humanity's waking up? Do you think things are changing?
I think because everything's so fast paced right now, I think we are on the cusp of a lot of change yet to come. But we may, because humanity is a little boneheaded sometimes. I mean, we don't like change, in general. Humanity, people fight change. And I really think that's a detriment for humanity to fight change. And right now we're going through a lot of change. You look at the world in itself, it's going through change because of global warming. You look at, humanity itself, we are evolving. It may not seem like it, because when you look at all the, the discontent in the world, we may not look like we're evolving, but we actually have grown. When you look at where we are today compared to where we were 100 years ago, we've evolved. But that's a 100-year window that we're looking at. So change happens slowly. It's not an overnight thing. It's not turning a light switch on. But I have faith that humanity will face whatever crisis comes, that we will move, we'll be all right, but we're going to have some bumps in the road. But I really feel that it's important to be aware of what's going on in the world, but also I think it all comes down to levels of awareness. I believe that, a lot of times we get swept away from the circumstances. And when we get swept away from the circumstances, when we get tied up in all the rumble and bumble that's happening in the world, then we are not connecting to our essence. We're not connecting to our true nature. And so we get swept away. But if we can connect, have some sort of practice. I'm a proponent. My podcast is called Contemplative Living. It's because I like to use meditation and contemplation to start my day. And it helps me to step out with being centered and with my awareness above the circumstances. I like to look at life above the circumstances. Now, that's not disconnected. In fact, if anything, I'm more compassionate for what's going on in the world, but I can rise above. I don't allow the circumstances to move me and to pull me, and so that I can stay centered. It's also a very stoic way of looking at life. I'm going to deal with what I can deal with. And I'll be aware of everything else, but I'm not going to get carried away with other people's stuff. I know what belongs to me, and I'm going to deal with what belongs to me. And I'm going to do as much as I can to be helpful and to be a part of the solution, But yeah.
No, I completely agree. It's nice to hear you say about those practices in place, because it is a journey, right? We got to continually work against the human condition as well on a daily basis. Because I do ponder about the fact that, when there's such a vast difference between having a belief and reading something from a textbook that you've just been taught to having obviously an experience like yourself.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times it takes discipline at first. In fact, that's what this week's podcast was about discipline, because we need, in order to establish our practice, it usually starts with discipline before it evolves into a state of being, and before it evolves into a practice, an actual practice that we can live with and that we can, enjoy using. But it requires that action. It requires action on our part. We can't read it in a book, like you said. We can read about it, and that can inspire us into action. Hopefully.
Yeah, and that's what my wish for humanity on a whole is that if we start to understand the true essence of ourselves, because there seems to be a severed connection. There certainly was on my journey anyway, growing up in my culture, that if that is nurtured back, the world would definitely look a very different place, and a very different place for my children that are coming into this world right now.
Yeah, because we have to think of our future generations. We have to think of what, can we make it a better place for them? And can we help them to understand, that there's something greater than just ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I got one last question for you, David.
All right.
As we wrap up the podcast, and that is, with everything we've covered today, what would you leave our listeners to ponder on?
Yeah, I think my favorite parting gift, I guess you could say, is that we don't need to go looking for spirit, because spirit is patiently there. It's there. And we just need to take the time to find our doorway, to find our practice, whether it's mindful meditation, breath work, walking meditation, whatever it may take, in order for us to quiet our minds enough. Do we need to, if you may need to develop some sort of ceremony or something to give the mind something to do while you quiet and begin to listen. And when we find that stillness, when we find that quiet space within us, that's when we can rise above. That's when we can connect to who we really are, our true nature. And within that true nature is love, empowerment, and just a sense of who we really are. And when we can do that, I think our life tends to smooth out. So we don't have to go looking for it, because it's already with us. We just have to look within ourselves.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. Where can people find you? You mentioned you have a podcast as well. You have a book. Where can we send everyone?
Yeah. If I also have a healing practice. I do, because what I learned in my own recovery, I go into the light.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I have a healing practice too. So, but everything, the portal to everything, Dave, is dharmatalks.com, DHARMA talks, TALKS dharmatalks.com. So dharmatalks.com, and you'll find, all the information about my healing practice, where I go into the light and I connect with your light essence, and, that guides me through the healing process. Or you can find my book. You can buy my book on Amazon or through my website. If you want a signed copy, through my website. And then I also have another book about contemplation, and I have a page there of contemplative living page that shows all the some of the older podcasts and some of the subjects, because we talk about things like, things that help us along our spiritual path and to develop that contemplative lifestyle.
Yeah, beautiful. I'll jump into your podcast. I'll subscribe and get on there, David. Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. I feel honored to have you on the show, mate, and you share your wisdom, and I really appreciate everything you're doing. And it's just great to be able to connect and have these conversations. There's Guy, so many angles and directions it could have gone in today.
Yeah, Guy, thank you so much for having me. It was a real privilege.
You're welcome. Thank you.